Oh, Kristine, you're muted.
I was just saying that you'd never know that I've been using Zoom for over 2 years because I still mess it up. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here on a Friday morning, wanting to learn a little bit more about reading and writing and how they make excellent friends. I am Kristine Kelly, if you don't know me, and that's a list of things that I try to do and am also learning about. Basically anything literacy related, I do, and some extra things like IET and teacher verification, the teacher verification model. And I'm also, some of you may have seen it in the beginning slide presentation, but I am now a doctoral student. I'm just finishing up my first of 2 core years. And it's exciting for me because my 28-person cohort of K-12 teachers are learning so much about adult basic ed, and I am educating them in every way possible. And also my focus is going to either be for my dissertation, which I am beginning on reading and writing and combining them in instruction, or assessing our current writing instruction models that we're using in our classrooms in Minnesota and creating some professional development around that. So one or the other. And it's kind of insane, but I'm doing it. So before we get started, get ready to write. You are going to be writing in the chat box. There's also a couple instances where you're going to be writing on a piece of paper, or if you choose a blank doc on another tab, for some of you who are more savvy than I am and can navigate the different tabs with Zoom, you are welcome to do that. So just be prepared. And the first chat, and please, one of the benefits of these sessions is, yes, I'm here sharing, but you all have a lot of great things to share as well. And so the more that we all hear, the more we benefit. So the question I have for you, and we're just going to take about 2 minutes here, what kinds of writing do students do in your classes directly connected to reading? And when I say reading, it doesn't just have to be print text. It can be reading images, it can be watching a video, it can be reading aloud to students and students listening to you. So it can be anything where students are interacting with text. So please, all right. Thank you. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Great. Lots with images, using vocabulary from the text, book study guides, comprehension questions. Patrick, you haven't started teaching yet? I assume you might be a new hire to your program. If so, good luck. If you're new to ABE, it is the greatest. Reflection journals, summarizing. We write every day. Thank you for that, Danette. W questions about the text. Dictation, great. Yes. For early ELL or beginning literacy students, copying notes, copying sentences, dictations, very important writing. Yes, lots of comprehension. Good. Reading A to Z. Boy, there's so much in reading A to Z, isn't there? Great. Brain pop. Not familiar about that. With that, I'm going to have to write that down and check that out. Spelling. Good. These are all great ways. I'm really glad to see that there is a lot of writing that is going on. Welcome, Patrick. Oh, like I said, you're going to love it. Burlington English, looking at pictures. So a lot of visuals. Of course, practice essay questions for the GED. Vocabulary sentences. That's about it. Well, you know what? That's something. So good for you. Great. Notes on text. We're going to talk a little bit about annotating. Oh, this is wonderful. Cornell notes. Yes. Yes, just note taking. That is an ACEs tip skill. It's a great way to organize thinking. It's a great skill for our students in the workplace and in post-secondary. Great. Personal experiences, absolutely, absolutely. We want students to reflect and we want them to connect. Thank you so much for all these great ideas. I will be, as I usually do, saving the chat for myself. And I usually post the chat in the participant folder as well. So especially, I think, today. So now you need your piece of paper or your blank Google Doc or Microsoft Word doc on another tab. And I'm going to give you 3 minutes. And we're going to do a quick write. And there's lots of ways to do quick writes. This particular quick write is around the question, what do you know about the benefits of combining reading and writing in instruction? Reading skills for today's adults. Yay! That's, of course, something I was involved in and I'm still involved in. So I'm going to start the timer, piece of paper, screen. What do you know about the benefits of combining reading and writing in instruction? You do not have to pay attention to grammar or spelling or complete sentences. You can bullet. The purpose is to get down your ideas. Starting, go. And remember, you don't have to put it in the chat. Thanks though, Anne. I love reading that. You can do it separately. This isn't something that we necessarily are going to share right away. So 1 minute warning. Okay, please put that aside for right now. Our agenda, and it's going to be fast and furious. We're going to talk a little bit about reading and writing together and why, some of the great benefits. We're going to try some things and then wrap up and I will answer any additional questions that you have. So reading and writing, why? There's some powerful research about combining reading and writing, and there's also a very interesting history from the beginning of teaching reading and writing in schools in the United States of often keeping them very polarized. And then within writing, keeping grammar, mechanics, usage, and then composition very polarized as well. And so a big passion of mine is to look at ways we can bring them together. And there's some great support. For example, writing about material students have read enhances their comprehension and retention. This is a very, very solid piece of research. Another great piece of research is when reading and writing receive equal emphasis in literacy instruction, students become better readers and writers. So a big goal of mine today is really looking at ways we can increase writing in general in our classrooms and give students multiple positive experiences with writing. Reading and writing, it's better than just reading, rereading, studying, and discussing it. And so there are 4 really key reasons to combine reading and writing and instruction. And one thing I want to say is we don't do it all the time. We do have to teach reading separately sometimes. We do have to teach writing separately, but there are opportunities when we have already had students go into text. We've talked about it. Students have studied vocabulary. The input has gone in that we can take some opportunities to help students demonstrate what they're learning or what they're connecting to in writing. So the first big reason, and I don't think any of these points are going to be a surprise, to activate prior knowledge and engage all students. So doing some kind of a writing activity, and when I'm saying a writing activity, that doesn't mean a paragraph, that doesn't mean an essay, it might be completing a sentence frame. It might be taking a handful of vocabulary words in an image and doing a little bit of free writing with those things. At the beginning of a text, lesson, or unit, to tap into prior knowledge, personal connections, this is so key. Our students' funds of knowledge are so key to their work with us. Connecting to previous learning, so having students do a little bit of writing that connects to kind of that coherence piece, connects what they just did previously or what they've done a little bit ago. It's a way to collect a baseline of student knowledge. And it's a great way to make predictions. We're going to do a little something today with that. Also, to collect information about student thinking. So again, we often know how some students are processing and thinking because they may be the ones who are volunteering in class, or they're the ones that feel comfortable using their English, or they feel comfortable speaking, and other students don't. So writing can give us some important information that multiple choice doesn't always give us, particularly about misconceptions or errors in reasoning that are happening if we ask students to show us a little bit of their thinking in writing. Students are thinking about material in a meaningful way. Rote knowledge, there's a place for it, definitely, but that alone doesn't deepen understanding. So we have to branch out from that. This information can be based on a stem or a frame. And that goes for every level of student. Sometimes teachers will say, well, I don't really use stems or frames with college prep students or high school equivalency students. And I say, I ask why. Right now in my doctoral program, we're being literally torn down as writers and rebuilt. And one of the key texts we were given is a book called They Say, I Say. And it's full of academic stems or frames. If we can use that at a doctoral level, you bet you can use that with any level of student. It can involve content or reflection on learning. It can be students reflecting on how they used a strategy, how they feel they did in class that day, what is something they did well. And I see that you love that book as well. Remaining questions they have, annotation of text. Third, to distinguish when students derive meaning from text and when they don't. The reality is discussion fills in gaps for some students who aren't actually lifting meaning off of print or orally or visually. And so we want to know what every student, where every student is at as far as understanding. The discussion is extremely valuable, but students need to build the skill of making meaning independently from text without discussion. Instead of always doing read, then discuss, then write. Now, no, it says instead of always doing, meaning you still can do that. Consider having students reading to them, viewing something, then doing a little bit of writing, then having a discussion, and then giving students an opportunity to add to or revise what they've written. And finally, to encourage metacognitive thinking. I don't know why I didn't capitalize E. Students can see progress. I've spent a lot of years teaching kind of that low intermediate, high intermediate group of students, kind of that pre-GED group of students. And I know that is one of the most difficult levels to get level gains. And also those students tend to need to be in instructional programming for a while, and they can feel like they're not making progress. When it comes to reading and writing, it's a little fuzzier than, say, math, where a student maybe at the beginning of the week didn't know how to subtract fractions, and at the end of the week does and can see that. A lot of times my students will say, am I really getting better in writing? Am I really getting to be a better reader? That's kind of a gray area for students. So we want students to see that they are actually every time picking up something, whether it's a detail or whether they're learning something about a strategy that works for themselves, or they're realizing that they have meaningful connections to make. These are all part of persistence. And students can determine strategies that work best. Formative assessment is great, and we can connect that directly to content. What was a key idea you learned today? But we also want students to think about a process. And that's why if students are working in groups, for example, on a group task, I like to ask them at the end of class, let's take a couple minutes, and I want you to just reflect in writing, what did you do? What is one thing you did well today in your group? What is one thing that you would change about your group? These are really powerful. They're short but powerful writing activities. And students can check in with their own comprehension. So that little voice inside their head, so that they can reflect back on what they really have learned, or if they realize that they are still not understanding, or they realize, for some of my students, they'll say, wow, I don't remember much. I think I was checked out. That's an important thing for our students to recognize. And students can recognize misconceptions, particularly with prediction activities, and going back and having students do a little bit of thinking about which predictions came true, which didn't, and why. We can do these things orally, certainly. And at some levels, we do them orally because our students' oral skills are very strong, but we can also do them in writing. Any questions at this point before I'm going to talk just a little bit more, and then we're going to do? Lorna, you are so invested now after writing your own thoughts. Yeah, there's a motivation piece there. We are going to go back to that quick write. So let's talk a moment about something called the pyramid of writing priorities. So one of the things that I find is I can get 10 people in a room and ask them to tell me what writing is in the classroom or what it means to teach writing, and I can get very different answers. So some teachers will say it's about learn depending on the level, it's about learning how to write the letters, or it's about learning how to write from left to right, or how to format writing on a page. Some teachers will say, well, it's about writing a product, it's about coming up with a polished piece through the writing process and learning the different steps to that process. Some teachers say it's writing creatively and reflecting. And some teachers say it's a lot about grammar usage and mechanics and sentence structure. So what I like that I'm reading lately is writing is a huge area. And we need to think of it in different levels, or we can think of it in different levels as a pyramid. And polished writing is there at the top. Polished writing is definitely something we want our students to do, even if it's a 2 or 3 sentence piece of polished writing where they go through some steps and they end up, editing it. They consider an audience, they practice, they get ideas, they fix their spelling, and they do their editing. It can be a 10-page paper, but notice that the biggest part of this pyramid is what's called provisional writing. And if you don't want to call it that, call it low stakes writing. It's brief writing to support learning. This is the kind of writing we need to find a way to do every time that we have students. It might only be 5 minutes, but this is a base, and it not only gives students opportunities to demonstrate thinking, deepen their comprehension, but it also provides them with some positive experiences with writing that aren't where they don't feel pressured for perfection. Many of my students have come up that way where they feel frozen because they want to write correctly. They want to use English correctly. And yes, these are important things, but the goal isn't perfection. The goal is that you can do something with your skills. And so I think that the sooner that we provide students just routine writing, like, oh, we're going to write again. This isn't even a big thing. They're also generating ideas, becoming more comfortable. We can start taking some of that and moving up in the pyramid. So what I suggest is that provisional writing is daily or every time you have class. Readable writing, where maybe they're expanding on that, or they're doing some more organized responses, now paying attention to some complete sentences, you're requiring them to include some examples, etc. Weekly. Polished writing monthly or regularly. And that would be extended writing and revisions. So we really want to think about writing, low stakes writing. So again, quick writes, warm-ups, exit tickets, filling in a sentence frame. Short answer questions, paragraphs. How would you adapt that for those of us who only have class twice a week? Good question. I only have had class twice a week for a while. So usually with 2 times a week, and I had them for an academic literacy block for 2 hours, I would do at least 2 provisional writing, like pre-reading, post-reading, depending on what we were doing. And I would probably have them, as far as the polished writing goes, that also depends on where they're at. If I'm working with GED students, we kind of got to get right on that. So really, I would say that the key here is that if you have them 1 time a week, 2 times a week, 4 times a week, every time you have them, you do at least one kind of this low stakes writing. So when we talk about provisional and readable writing, so that low stakes writing, not getting to the polish point, when we focus on the 4 points that I made, the 4 benefits, we can get students doing low stakes writing and having successful experiences with writing while they deepen understanding of content. And the question comes up, how am I going to be able to read everything and give students feedback on everything that they're writing? And basically, this is one of my favorite quotes of all time. If you can read everything your students write, you're not assigning enough writing. This is key, and this is very key in the research. You do not have to read everything students write, and you do not have to evaluate everything students write. In fact, if we evaluate and edit or correct everything that students write, they're going to develop this idea of perfection. Now, the other question is, how do I not get them to develop bad habits? Well, this isn't the only kind of work on writing we're doing. This has a purpose, right? You're still going to be doing grammar instruction, right? You're still going to be having writing activities where students are paying attention to more polished writing, and where you are going to go back and forth with feedback, okay? So there's value in writing. And it's the same as when we do a turn and talk, or we ask students to do a turn and talk. They don't always have to share with the class what they talked about. Okay, there's value. We want students to see that there's value in reflection and there's value in activities. Now, my English learners, particularly my Russians and East Europeans, their heads blow up a little bit because they say, well, wait a second, I need to know that everything is perfect. And we have to have a conversation about that. Is not the end goal of writing. Okay, there are lots of reasons that we write. We just want for a lot of our students to see themselves as writers and having something to share. Would I ever announce to students that this next writing will not be read by me in order to have them write with less pressure? Yes, absolutely. I think that it's important that we talk again, if we can, talk to students about that and say, this is for you, or you're writing this. I'm not going to look at it, but you are going to share it with a small group, or you are going to share it with another classmate, or you're going to keep it and you might go back to it when we do a longer piece of writing. We want students to focus on their ideas. Okay. Ensure that students have one positive writing experience each day. In my pre-GED, GED classroom, the 2 most terrifying subjects for students typically are math and writing. And so we spend a lot of time talking about growth mindset in math and helping to remove that barrier of students thinking they can't do math. Writing is very similar for some of our students. They really don't see themselves as writers or what they consider to be writing. It's broader than that. And please be looking at your chat box. Some great comments. Abby, thank you. I find that their quality and quantity gets less and less when I don't respond to what they wrote. So yes, it doesn't mean that you don't respond, that you only respond every once in a while. It means that you balance it and you do give them opportunities to do the writing, to do a reflection, where I'm not asking you to have students write a page and then never respond to it. We're talking about some of these shorter pieces where students are doing the shorter writing, the quick writing, the sentence frame, answering a quick question at the end of something.
Yeah, I think so. We did 2 bags and
You are absolutely welcome to respond. But the response might be just responding in some way personally to what they wrote and telling them that the purpose of this is not to edit it. The purpose of this is for ideas. And then you may want to, at least acknowledge and write kind of like we talk about dialogue journals. What structures help students stay motivated to do a thorough job without a teacher response? Well, that's for my students. A lot of it starts with them learning that they are writers and that they have something to say, and giving them opportunities to say, to tell their story, to share their opinion, to make their connection is really important and motivating for students. A few words about translanguaging. I get asked this question. There's a great book that my boss, Patsy Egan, gave me. It's called Writing Between Languages from Heinemann. And it goes through the process of showing, working with ELs from the very beginning, the place that their first language has in teaching writing. And it is a fascinating book that has drastically changed the way that I've thought about my English learners in my classroom, because as time has gone on, my class has become about 75% English learners, whereas it used to be mainly students whose primary language is English. So I've had to make some changes. It's important to allow students to write in their primary language when they are brainstorming, when they are trying to think of a focus, when they're working on organizing, when they're trying to generate details, when they're expressing themselves. We want them to learn English. We want the products to be in English, but the research behind students being able to process and having the opportunities to process in their first language, whether they're talking to in a linguistic pairing or they are doing a little bit of writing, it's very powerful. They can express themselves and prepare. It helps prepare them to have something to say about what they've read. I really encourage you to check out this book. There's lots of wonderful examples that show kind of the process of development, how the students are developing into being more and more comfortable writing in English. Thinking takes place through any language in which the brain automatically connects. So I, especially with quick writing, I've had students say, I look around and other students are writing for the full 5 minutes and I'm really struggling because I don't have all the words. If students can write, some, of course, at certain levels, students don't or haven't written in their primary language. I tell students, I think of one of my students who I would say, switch into French. Just, you know what, if you get stuck and you've got an idea, start writing in French, and as soon as you can, jump back to English. And what the feedback has been is, I feel the students are like, okay, I feel like looking around, if anyone were to look at me, I'm still writing, like I'm part of this, I'm doing this. It's very frustrating to sit and not feel like you have anything to say, not because you don't have anything to say, but because you don't know how to say it. I think this is the book. Thank you, Abby. I can always count on you. It's called Writing Between Languages. Yes. Developing their own voice. Again, we look at, there are multiple purposes for writing. And why would we deny our ELs one of their greatest tools for learning English? Okay, everyone in the chat box, I would like you to finish one of these sentence stems. I would give all three sometimes to students. The word in red can change. You can see that here the students are processing content, but also processing it in different ways and practicing their knowledge of using conjunctions. So choose one, because, but, or so. Take a moment and put in the chat box. Please rewrite the entire sentence. Reading and writing can work together in instruction because reading and writing can work together in instruction, but whatever comes to your mind, reading and writing can work together in instruction. So Christy, I recognize your name from ABE Foundations. I just issued you a CEU certificate. Yes. please, please, when you have a moment, check out the different things, all the different ideas that we can be exposed to. And that's a great question. That's a great question, Marie. And that would be a question. Again, this is this is a great book, and it really addresses that idea of working with students who don't write. I would love if you would want to email me that question, and I would love to pull in a couple of pre-lit low beginning teachers to give you some tips. Thank you. I love this. I love this activity. It is a quick activity. It's called Because But So. You can use it in any content area after learning a little bit of content. I've used it with science content, with social studies content. I remember doing it once with students where it was I think it was something like the Constitution of the United States was created because the Constitution of the United States was created, but the Constitution of the United States was created. So you create a kernel sentence, and then you decide, because but so is the regular format. I have used other coordinating conjunctions, like even though. My students struggle with even though, or although, or I'll even throw in something like nevertheless, and see if they can remember to use the semicolon. So it's a really great, it's very short. You can see kind of what they're thinking. And then if you have students share, they're getting multiple exposures to how other students are processing ideas in the content. So that's just a little trick, and it is a quick way to do some writing. I'm so saving this chat. So keep the questions coming. If there are questions, we're going to try some things. Output requires input. I went to a session in California several years ago, and the person was an EL specialist working with adults. And she said, we often have students who, and it's not just ELs, it's all students who have those times when they're like, I don't know what to write about. I don't know what to write. And there's nothing worse than a blank screen or a blank piece of paper or a blank Post-it. She said, we have to give them input. Okay. When we ask them to connect to their personal experiences or opinions, they've got something, but we've got to make sure we give them enough input. And if we are reading aloud to them, or we are looking at images, or we are reading an article, or we are listening to a song, or we are watching a video or a film clip, we're giving them input. So let's take advantage of that. And as I talk through some of these ideas, think about ways to adapt to your level, okay? Sometimes students are filling in one word to a sentence frame and recopying, okay? Sometimes students are doing a little dictation. Sometimes students are just generating single words, okay, that aren't even part of a sentence, all the way up to students who are doing, who are writing incomplete sentences and writing, more. Think about ways to adapt to your content. Think about how to add pieces of a strategy. Maybe you're doing some of these things or parts of them, but how can you increase writing about content in your classroom? How can you add a routine? It's not adding 5 or 6 different things. It's picking 1 or 2 things and getting into a routine. Barb, I appreciate what you're saying. Reading and writing can work together in instruction, but sometimes we want to read just for fun. Absolutely. And this is why we have separate time for reading. This is why we read sometimes to learn reading strategies and to be able to answer comprehension questions and understand things like text structure. And sometimes we read to be inspired, and we don't do anything with it, but we just take it in and we sit back and we enjoy, and we just enjoy hearing or reading about something. Our students need those moments. How do I feel about whole class writing for high beginners? That's a great question. Lorna, would you be willing to unmute and say a little bit more what you mean about whole class? Are you talking about like collaborative writing where the teacher is leading that writing?
Yes, I am. Yes, I mean, we've been doing kind of a variety. We look at the pictures in Burlington English, and then students chime in, what do you see? And we write sentences. What do you see? And we talk about, different kinds of sentences. What's the subject? What's the verb? And I use colors to highlight nouns and verbs and adjectives. And then also, Jamboard, like sometimes in Jamboard students will chime in, but it's kind of not all students know how to use Jamboard. So a lot of times they will say the sentence and I will write it. So kind of the teacher doing the writing is what I'm meaning. Yeah.
Absolutely. I have been doing a lot of reading right now about writing, and collaborative writing has some of the largest research base behind it. Whether it's students writing together in groups or pairs or the entire class and the teacher leading. In fact, I was at a session last week where that's how it started. Was there was a graphic organizer on the board, and all of the students, it was a process writing paragraph. They chose a process that everybody could say something about, that they knew about. And the teacher actually provided the topic sentence and then asked students for steps, for details, and then wrote them on the board as students were writing them in the graphic organizer. And then as a class, they put together a concluding sentence. I have actually done this at the college with students doing kind of higher level summary writing, where they have to get into a group, and as a group, they have to put together a well-organized summary. And that conversation, it supports students in particular who maybe aren't as comfortable or as high level when they get to hear that conversation, or they have that scaffolding built in. Please continue to do collaborative writing at all levels. So video note-taking, pair and share write. This actually has collaboration. The result of this is the written summary paragraph, or even summary sentences if students are just writing at the sentence level. It's provisional and readable, meaning it's meant to be low stakes. You can move it into readable if you say, I want the sentences to be complete, and I want them to, include a few concrete details. You can scaffold as needed. You can always pre-teach key vocabulary from the video or the text. You can use closed captions with the video. Repeated viewings. I like to do that when I have short videos. Structured note taking. You can give them a graphic organizer or a set of partially filled in Cornell notes and give them some of it, and then they have to work on filling in the rest, provide a transcript. You can use sentence stems, frames, or paragraph frames. Give them a word bank. Give them some words and phrases. Visuals. You can pair them linguistically. I suggest this only when it's fair. So if you have a couple students who do not have a linguistic pairing, then I don't do linguistic pairing. But if you can, they can discuss some of their ideas in their primary language before writing in English. We're not going to do this one, but here's an example of something I did with my class. And this could be done as a pre-reading to build background knowledge. I know it says building background knowledge during or post-reading. This happened to be last year. It's the Black History in 2 minutes. We did it during February, during Black History Month. The Harlem Renaissance in 2 minutes. I used this I didn't use it right away. We did a little bit of reading before this, but I gave them 4 questions to take notes on, just notes. And then we watched it twice. They got into pairs and they compared notes. And so they got to benefit from combining some of their ideas, things that maybe one of them missed. Sometimes I'll let them get together with another pair and continue to add. And then together as a pair, they need to write a short paragraph summary of the video content, or a minimum of 4 sentences. This, of course, was a pre-GED, GED level. And then I give them a word bank. These are key words that were used during the video so that they can choose words that they want to use. And then there is that additional support for them. So again, it's not, this is support because these are precise words, and I would like them to use these words. And so rather than hope that they use them, I give them. And sometimes I'll say, I want you to use at least 4 of these words. That's one way to do this. You can also have them write about visuals, again, with a word bank. It can be very provisional, that low stakes, or just moving into readable. You can use it after any text. Students can write organized paragraphs or sentences. You can support them as necessary. Giving them the word bank, it can contain content words. It can contain academic vocabulary. If students are at lower levels, those kind of general service words, you really want to make sure they use. Discourse connectors, you can include for example, and however, if those are words you want them to choose from, or a combination of these words. And you can do a See, Think, Wonder as a support. This was also something that we did later on. It was a post-reading activity. Again, I'm giving them some of those key words, and I gave them these 3 visuals, and they could do some writing. They could write 3 or 4 sentences using these visuals as kind of a trigger. So I tried to capture the conversation that we had about the Great Migration, and then capturing, this idea of music and the arts and movement and creativity and expression. And students come up with all kinds of things. But again, the visuals are a scaffold. And I know that a lot of times in lower levels, we always use visuals, but I constantly use visuals with my higher level students. It's a great prompt. There's a lot going on here for thinking. They're looking at using the words correctly. They are showing that they understand and connect content from the visuals to what they've been reading. There's a lot happening. Prediction sentences. We're actually going to do a little something here. Provisional writing. And they can consider images, words, phrases from a text before they've read it. This is a great way for them to try out making inferences, predicting relationships between things. You can have them focus on, you can even give them some things and say, make some predictions about the elements of, what do you think the setting is? What do you think the problem is going to be? What can you tell maybe about one of the characters? Okay. And then they revisit them after reading. It can provide a lot of motivation. One thing I love to do, and I don't know if you've done it, but I learned it from the math people, from slow reveal graphs, where I take the topic and I slowly reveal pictures. So I would do it like this, and then we're actually going to do the next prediction activity where I'll say, I want you to write down some, words or a sentence that is connected to that picture. Okay, now I want you to write some words or a sentence that's connected to that picture. Okay, and I want you to think about, as I reveal each picture, to kind of see if your prediction about what the text is about gets more narrow or more detailed. Then there's the next picture. If anyone wants to take a guess, I invite you to put it in the chat box. And then I give students, they'll write sad, alone, cloudy, any number of words, but they're just generating words. This one, some students will say insomnia, tired, awake, again, it's generating words. Anybody want to take a guess what this text was about? Need for vitamin D, not being able to sleep, seasonal depression, living in Minnesota, spring in Minnesota. This last one for some students really gets them with that light. Seasonal canceled plans. I think it's just, I think it's wonderful. And it isn't that any of these answers, I mean, if they came up with canceled plans, I'd be like, wow, what a great description of the mood of some of these pictures. But it's kind of fun, you know, for students, and we could do it orally, but I like having them write down write down all this vocabulary, you know, that potentially could be connected. You can do it as a slow reveal or all together, and students can revise their predictions as necessary. Okay, so prediction sentences. We're just going to take, I want you to write one sentence in the chat box, okay? These are all phrases from a short story. One is a complete, two complete sentences, or a couple of them are. I want you to make one prediction about what this story is about, where it happens, what the plot is, anything about the characters, one sentence that you're predicting about this short story. Old friends unexpectedly meet. Shared custody after separation. Okay, fall. Nice. Someone goes back home for a visit. Fall in New York City. Maybe the change in the seasons. Time travel since Bill is still young. Old relationship, time passing past age and memory and relationships. There's connections that are happening here that students do. I don't know if you've ever done this where you've put words, select words from a text or phrases and then had them use those. Reunion. Some of you may be familiar with this. I am keeping an eye here on the time. I love to do an activity like that as a prediction activity. And then we talk about it and we see kind of what are the trends, what seems to be what students are thinking in general. And then we put those aside and I say, we're going to go back to those. Using that same short story, I love to do guided annotating. And guided annotating, I can do it on slides or printed copies virtually or in person, because I can use specific questions to help them focus on a particular reading skill or particular element of the text. And everyone has an opportunity to think of something and then can bring something forward to the discussion, because some of our students need a little time. They can't answer a question right on the spot. So here's an example of how I would do this. And I'm just going to show you. The short story is Early Autumn by Langston Hughes. It is my favorite story to use for inferencing. And I would just do this with a short story or a poem or an excerpt. And I break it up and we go through it together. I may pre-teach any key vocabulary. And just this first one, when Bill was very young, they had been in love. Many nights they had spent walking, talking together. Then something not very important had come between them and they didn't speak. Impulsively, she had married a man she thought she loved. Bill went away bitter about women. Yesterday, walking across Washington Square, she saw him for the first time in years. And then I would prompt, what can we infer about Bill and Mary so far? And I give them a chance to just jot down some ideas. I've also done this where I actually print out these excerpts, put them on flip chart paper, and students have to put Post-its up about what they think. But writing is key. You can give them sentence stems or frames. I will also just ignore the chat. What do you think will happen next? So I am guiding them and doing, about some things to pay attention to. I'm not going to read the entire story. I wasn't planning on it anyway, but asking questions about how characters feel. Okay. Asking questions about the setting. Asking questions about the craft of the writer. Why does the writer put some of these words. You're looking very, he wanted to say old, because a lot of times our students, they need that support. How does the temperature reflect Mary's mood? This is very guided because I want them to focus on certain things. I want to give them a little bit of time to do this so that, does Bill mean what he says? Why might Mary feel a little sick? Symbolizing of the lights. The end, of course, always gets my students when they find out that she named her youngest boy after that man. And then they're like, oh my gosh, this love affair. And this happens to be about space and people. The key to this, though, is that you are guiding students, and then you can have a discussion and everybody's got something to contribute. Plus, they have been exposed to all the thinking behind the curtain that effective readers do to make sense of text. You can also do a post based on the same story, give them a choice to go back to their predictions, to write about what the story reminds them of, if they could change the story, how they feel, if they could talk to a character, what they think the theme is. A key is choice. Give them some choice about what they would do. And no, I would not necessarily focus on fiction. I just love this for inferencing. You can do this with any kind of text. You can also easily put one of these up. I know teachers who have these up. They just have them up all the time in the room, and they say, okay, we're going to stop right here. Everyone right now on a Post-it, and you're going to post it, on the board before you leave. Or you're going to turn to a partner and you're just going to share. What are you thinking? What are you wondering? What are you noticing? What are you picturing? What does this remind you of? What are you figuring out? What did you just learn? Let's take a moment. These are small things, but formative assessment like this is directly connected to improved scores on standardized testing. I'm not fully sure how that works, but it is a fact. Now, I'm going to give you 1 minute because we have 2 minutes, or actually, this is about as good as I can get with finishing where I want to finish. Sorry that we didn't get all the way through. I'm willing to stay and answer questions. The quick write we did, go back to it. You can either do a quick write add, or you can do the quick write all over again from the beginning. The power of this activity is students can add by answering that same question. What do you know about the benefits of combining reading and writing in instruction? They can add something and see, wow, okay, so yeah, I did learn a couple things that I didn't know before. I can add more to what I wrote. Or I know that sometimes teachers will just have them start again and they can write, and almost every time the detail is going to be increased, or the amount that they write is going to be increased. This is a powerful motivation, and it's a feeling of progress. And it also, if they hand it in, gives you a lot of teaching insights. My slides will be available after today. Absolutely. They already are in the participant folder. Where do I find my fiction resources for intermediate advanced learners? I go to Common Lit. I also go to Actively Learn. My email is, no, it's not kkelly091. It is kkelly01 at hamlin.edu. It is also here on the email, or on the slide. I invite you, this is part of my job. Please send me any questions. If it involves something like lower levels of ESL, which I know some things about, but there are people that I know who know a lot more, I will get them into the email conversation and they will offer their ideas for you. Whatever level you teach, I can get you somebody, either me or somebody, who can answer your questions. Don't ever hesitate to email me. We are at we are right at time. There was one more thing I was going to have you do. And that is this, that I love to do this as a post-reading activity. I used to think blank about whatever topic, but now I think blank. My students, this is a great opportunity because it allows us to have conversations about the types of evidence, the types of experiences that change our thinking. And this is a lot of fun. Think in terms of where can you add low stakes writing where students can connect to text either before, during, and after. Every time, whether they're looking at a visual, a video, they're listening to a read aloud, they're writing about song lyrics that they're hearing and learning language, where can you get them writing? They're not going to write polished pieces or want to write for other purposes if they don't want to write at all. Common Lit, actively learn. There are parts of it that you can pay for, but I've never paid for what I've used. All kinds of selection, Lexiled. I love it. For students who are at about a third grade reading level and above, who are studying for something like the GED or soon the high set and need literature, Common Lit is a fabulous website for poetry, short stories, excerpts from novels. Thank you, everyone. Okay, Peter, that's it. If I can get people to think about reading and writing together and increase opportunities for students to write in positive ways, I drop the mic. I'm done. Thank you, everybody. It is essential, Carolyn. And it doesn't have to take a ton of time.
Thanks, Kristine, for the awesome session. So everybody, we're on lunch break. The next session will be starting at, let's look, 12:15 for concurrent session 3.
Barb, are you still there before you go? Barb, are you there?
I am.
Yeah. Barb, would you email me? I would love to chat with you a little bit more about that.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are so many K-12 strategies that are just can be adapted so beautifully. And I would love to hear about some of the ones that you've been using.
Oh yeah, they're really transferable. I retired like 3 years ago, but then we went right online when I started working for adult ed. And now that we're back, I have an 80-year-old GED gentleman, and I have about some English language learners, and they're all kind of at the same place when it comes to writing. And I'm going to challenge anybody who says math is more scaffolded. Writing is so scaffolded. You know, it's breaking it down into simple tasks. And even these adult learners, when they see a little Post-it note, I can do that. You know, instead of this blank document, they just freak out. And it's so much friendlier than, sometimes I have them put it in their notebooks, or sometimes I have them put it on the door on their way out, whatever, you know, works for us. And sometimes I also focus on, what am I looking at today? I'm looking that you can write a simple sentence. That's all I care about. Now I'm writing if you can use an exclamation point or a question mark. Do you know the difference? How do you use it? Yeah, so.
And that's it. Feedback, it needs to be specific to what we're talking about, because there's nothing more of a bummer than getting something back that's just covered with marks and that they're not going to learn from.
Right, right. Well, then in high school, such a trick that, you know, you have them write an introductory claim, write the 3 things you're going to write about on separate days. So by the end, they've got 25 Post-it notes and a paper. You know, they didn't know, they wrote a paper, and they did it so well. But yeah.
Yeah, no, please email me, or could you put your email in the chat box so
absolutely,
that I can follow up